Hello and welcome to True Audio Files. This is the first video I'm doing for 2025. Kind of wanted to start it off with kind of talking about the state of records in general and the industry, music industry that is, and kind of try to give my thoughts on what I think about where the industry is heading, what's going on with the industry, and maybe some other odds and ends of some stuff that I've seen on some other vinyl community posts that I've seen on YouTube that I wanted to kind of briefly mention. And it's just in general, it's not necessarily picking on any specific vinyl community member or anything like that. So, but let's start with kind of the records and record industry for 2025. I mean, one of the things that I've definitely seen, and you've probably seen as well, is that there have been a bunch of new pressing plants that have opened up recently, and I think that that's a good thing. I don't expect that there's going to be any really negativity about it, because I think there were a couple of reasons why it needed to be done. The biggest one being there was generally a huge backlog. The big artists, maybe there was a 3 to 6 month backlog, but for those independent artists and just anyone that wanted to produce records that weren't big name artists or labels, you're generally talking a 6 month to a year backup. Even people like a Mobile Fidelity was having a hard time keeping up with the demand and the need to be able to press their records. So they made their own pressing facility that finally opened last year, and you also have Vinyl Me Please, who opened up their own facility last year, and there were a few others that opened up, and I think that that's a good thing. I hope what's going to happen from that is a couple of things. One is I think we've already started seeing that the backlog has really slowed down a lot, so now it's not, you're not having to wait 6 months or a year to get stuff printed and pressed. It's generally a pretty quick turnaround. The interesting thing, which is not record related but it's music related, is that there seems to be backlogs for like CDs, super audio CDs and things like that, though, which is kind of odd. But I guess it's to be expected because I think people anticipated, that is, the pressing plants that make these anticipated the slowdown to happen quicker than it did, and it just never materialized as badly as they thought that it was going to. So there's a backlog more on super audio CD and CDs than there are on records now, which is kind of interesting. But anyways, getting back to the records and why I think it's a good thing that we have the pressing plant explosion, if you will, that we have is, one is, again, the backlog issue, which we really shouldn't have much of that anymore. But I think the bigger one for me is the quality control. I mean, because what was happening is all these pressing plants were trying to press things as fast as they could. They just didn't have the manpower to really do the quality control that they needed to. And quite honestly, they didn't really feel that they needed to do the quality control because people just wanted product. They wanted to get it out there as quickly as possible so they could feed the masses, if you will, and keep up with the demand. And now that's not an issue. So hopefully quality control goes up quite a bit because they're not going to have to do second and third shift pressings, and they can take their time a little bit more. That will definitely affect the next issue that I feel hopefully will start to happen a little bit, is because of the competitiveness or the competitive nature of having more pressing plants. Hopefully cost might come down a little bit, although if you bump up the quality control, that adds costs. So I don't know, but I hope that the quality control at the bare minimum gets improved, and hopefully cost is more in line, or not in line, but more competitive than it used to be. I mean, I have definitely noticed that there are, in a few cases, records that are getting into the $25-ish dollar range, $28 range, where for the longest time in 2023, 2024, it was not it was unheard of almost to see records in the $25 range. Almost everything was $30, $35, $40, even $50 to $70 for new releases, which was just incredible. Like Chappell Roan's special edition version of her album was going for like $60, $70. Beyonce's Cowboy Carter, I guess it's a special edition, I don't know, but it was going for like 50, $60. And it was just those, both of those I think were only 2 record sets. So it's not like they were these huge like 4 or 5 record sets. So, but then you had other people where for that same $50 or $60, you had like Dolly Parton, who was releasing a 4 record set. So, and actually Taylor Swift, actually her latest album re-released kind of the deluxe edition, if you will. I think she called it the anthology collection of her latest album. And that was a 4 record set that sold for $60. So we're seeing some breaks in the pricing, and I'm really hoping that that continues because I think it's going to have to if the industry wants to continue to see these purchases being made. And kind of getting into that and following up with that is the cost of used records. And we've definitely seen a huge spike in a lot of used records in out there. It's been insane. I mean, used to be the Fleetwood Mac Rumors was like a $8 to $10 record that you could find just about anywhere. Nowadays, I think I've seen it going for like $20, $25 sometimes, and depending on the condition, even more. So I think that I'm hoping to see that kind of get settled a little bit, but there's certainly going to still be those records that no matter what you do, there's still going to be a big demand for them, and they're in turn just going to be more expensive, and the pricing will probably just continue to rise on stuff like that, especially like older Mobile Fidelity, like the Nirvana Nevermind, or like Beatles titles, Rolling Stones titles, Fleetwood Mac Rumors, those types of things, and old jazz titles especially. Those ones, just because the demand is going to probably not wane all that much on those, you're still going to see that. And that is, I say that assuming that, more and more people are still going to continue to buy records and discover some of the older music that, and they want kind of the original copies of them. But I'm hoping with the better and better reissues that come out, which is kind of my next topic, that, the originals that may not sound as good, or maybe it sounds about the same as these newer reissues, will become less in demand. So fingers crossed for that. But that kind of leads into my next one, which is the high-end audiophile reissues that are coming out. And I mean, are we seeing them kind of run their course? I mean, Mobile Fidelity's one steps. There's definitely still a backlog of them that need to come out. There's still some Van Halen titles, Michael Jackson Off the Wall, and I know there's some others that are planned as well, and some Miles Davis ones that are planned. But and UHQR is kind of the same way, and we're seeing also Impex doing the one steps, and Kraft sort of kind of doing the small batch. And I say sort of because they really haven't been doing all that many recently. But we are still seeing some of that stuff coming out. They've already been announced. For example, Green Day's Dookie is coming out in a one step. But be curious to see what happens with that market and if that market thrives still. I know that it's kind of lost some of its luster just because it used to be that, the Kraft small batch for the prime example, that they'd announce it and then within minutes of it being announced, they'd be sold out. And kind of similar with the MoFi titles when they were announced, the pre-orders dried them up and sold them out almost instantly. And you're really not seeing that as much anymore. So, and same thing with UHQRs to a certain extent. So I'm hoping to see that market stay around, but I'm hoping also that maybe we cut some costs a little on those, getting back to the abundance of pressing plants and competitiveness and pricing. Because I just think that, especially the UHQR series, they're just, $150 for a lot of the titles. And I mean, $125 for one steps is still a little extreme. I'd love to see them all go back down to around about $100 or less for those special releases, but I think time will tell on that. I guess it all depend on demand and whether it really warrants that price tag still. So we'll see. And I know cost definitely has something to do with it, because costs have generally gone up, from my understanding anyways, in the industry, 25 to 30%. over the past few years. So next up are going to be kind of some things that I've seen in some vinyl community posts, and I wanted to kind of touch on them because I think that a lot of people brought up some great points and some great information out there about these topics, but I also think that it's not quite as simple as some of them have made that out to be, which is almost always the case, because nothing is almost nothing is as easy as it seems or as simple as it seems. First one would be, I think I've seen a couple of posts about, the myth, if you will, quote unquote, that, using cheap audio equipment to play records is just not worth it, or it's going to be a waste of time, and you really shouldn't do it, type of a thing. And I will say that, and the ones that I've seen have brought up great points about, like the Victrolas or the Crosley players, or any of those that generally cost less than $100, and maybe even ones that are kind of all-in-one systems. When I mean all-in-ones, I say like record players, which are usually speakers built in also, and any of those ones that go for like $150 or less, it's kind of the barometer. I mean, give or take a little bit. I think those should probably be avoided, because I just think that they are not going to be good for your records long term, especially if you listen to records a lot, because it puts a lot more weight on the record, which can cause damage long term to the records. And obviously the sound quality just isn't very good on those. Now, that being said, stuff like the Audio Technicas that are in that price range where it's just the turntable alone, I mean, those are definitely a great starting point, and I don't see a problem with those turntables or anything higher, a little higher end than that, and you definitely can get some enjoyment out of that. I think the big thing to take away, though, that is definitely the case with records, and not as much of an issue with digital devices, if you will, is analog. There's definitely a much more noticeable, appreciable difference the higher you go up in the products that you use, the equipment that you use. And I'm not here saying that you need to spend $10,000 on a turntable and a cartridge and a preamp and all that kind of stuff to notice a difference. But buying a $120 Audio Technica turntable that comes with the cartridge, and buying, let's say, that next level up, which I think the Audio Technica that I like, and I can't remember the model number, I think it's the 120. I think that retails for about $300. Getting that with like let's say an Ortophon Blue or something like that, and a really good phono preamp, maybe a preamp that sells for more than $200 or $300. And if you have a decent pair of speakers and a stereo, you will definitely hear a noticeable difference. And I'm not going to sit here and say it's one of those things that it's just going to be a night and day difference, and it's going to be one of those things that just is evolutionary and revolutionary, and just make or break whether you like listening to records or not. But it's definitely going to make a big difference. And as you go up the line, I mean, it comes to a point where the cost of diminishing returns. Once I think you start hitting that $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 mark for just like the turntables and cartridges and whatever, that's when you'll probably start noticing a smaller and smaller difference between them all. But definitely spending more money on that stuff, beyond like the $200 or $300 price range, you will definitely notice a difference. Whether that's going to affect your experience and your enjoyment out of them, that's all subjective, I guess, and it's a matter of opinion. For me, it definitely makes a big difference for me, and I've definitely noticed a big difference, but maybe not for everybody. So next one up that I saw was talking about like 180 gram or 200 gram vinyl and whether it's actually better or not. And this is a tricky one, because if done right, the answer is yes. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail, but just 180 gram alone, just getting a heavier weight vinyl, if you're not pressing it right, you're not cutting the original lacquer correctly, things on that nature, maybe, and not using good quality vinyl like virgin vinyl or the higher end materials like super vinyl or clarity vinyl or that kind of thing. Not using that, not doing those steps, will definitely change the sound quality of the 190 gram or 200 gram vinyl. So yeah, 180 gram or 200 gram vinyl on its own uh, technically will have the ability to sound better, but only if the process is right. So really well cut lacquer, really good pressing, really good quality material, vinyl material that's being used. Those things will make a difference. And yes, they do make a difference on like 140 gram or whatever gram vinyl too. But I've seen an article by the guy who used to run QRP a long time ago, did RTI, but now I think he's at Vinyl Me Please's pressing plant. But his whole thing was is he's done a lot of experimentation in terms of materials, weight, and things like that. And he's found that, in his opinion, that a 200 gram pressing done correctly will give added benefit to the sound quality over 180 gram or 140 gram vinyl. So I'm going to take his word for it, for someone who actually does this for a living, over, just me, who is kind of just the average Joe on the street listening to this stuff. So his claim is that it definitely makes a difference. So I'm going to take his word for it. But all those factors have to come into play. You can't just press on 200 gram vinyl. If it's cheap vinyl, if it's not pressed properly, if the lacquers aren't caught well, it's not going to matter, which is the case with a lot of this kind of stuff. Then that kind of sort of segues into my last part, which I've kind of seen a little bit of information on again, that every once in a while rears its ugly head on social media, and that is vinyl cut from digital. And I know I've talked about this a lot on this channel. There's definitely a bunch of videos that I talk about. I might even have some that I can try to find and maybe post on here so you can watch. But generally, most people, I don't know of anybody that can truly hear a difference between a record cut from digital, if that digital transfer is done really, really well, versus a straight to analog cut. And prime example of that is, the earlier one steps, where most of them were cut, mobile fidelity one steps, I should say, that were mostly cut from digital. Before people knew that they were cut from digital, people were singing their praises, especially people who were sticklers about cutting from analog, and how you had to cut from analog to do records justice. And those people were singing the praises of these mobile fidelity one steps that were cut from digital, because they didn't know. So, and in many cases they said that's the best sounding version of that album that they've ever heard. So I don't think that there's much of a difference. I don't think there's a noticeable difference, and that's a personal opinion. I know other people's opinions vary, but I know that I didn't really see much out there of people talking down the mobile fidelity releases that were cut from digital before it was known that they were digital. There are some advantages too, like compilations are a prime example. If you take songs from the original master tapes and digitize them, and then you can make a compilation, so you don't have an additional generation of tape that you need to cut from, which will lessen the sound quality as well. And also, if there are issues with the original master tapes where there's some damage to the tape, and maybe you find a master copy that you can take a snippet from and kind of repair the original master digitally, and that way you get a more pristine sounding master. It would be a digital master, of course, but a master copy. So I think there's something to be said for cutting from digital in many cases. It also saves old master tapes, because you don't have to continually play those tapes over and over and over and over again. You have a great quality digital transfer, and now you can cut from that as many times as you want without having to go back to the original master and damaging that. So, well, that's everything I've got for the first episode of 2025. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the topics I talked about here. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope to do a lot more of these in the future coming up. I know that Michael Jackson's Off the Wall from MoFi is coming out later this week, so I hope to get that in time to listen to it and compare it to my original copies I've got for my next episode, but I don't know if that's going to be the case, so we'll cross our fingers and hope. So That's everything I've got. I hope you appreciated it. I hope you liked it. If you did, please hit that like button. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you subscribers. If you do subscribe, if you don't, please do so. Make some comments below. I'd love to hear your comments. And that's everything I've got. Thank you very much. You have yourself a good rest of the day and a good rest of your week. Thanks a lot.